All right, welcome back. We are COMP397 in the winter 2022 semester at Centennial, and it's week 5, part 2 of our broadcast and recording. We just finished off making a coin in Blender, and we brought it into Unity. Here it is. And it's not really exciting, but it is something we can use as a 3D asset. Okay, and we can make more than one of these. We also talked about how we made simple animation. And there are some pieces that are missing. So if you wanted to continue to fix it, if I went into the animation clip for the coin, here's our coin, you can see where we have our coin rotations. This is kind of interesting. So here's something we can do. And you can actually take a look at the coin. We have rotation across the y-axis if there's some, and there's different points where we have our rotation, but then what happens is we go here, we animate, right? We can actually see the animation here. One thing we don't get, right, for the coin animator, right? If we turn on the coin animator here, we don't see it. It's not something that we can see here in real time, right? But we notice that when we're inside of our game, that it kind of has this little skip right there. And the reason why this is happening is what we did in Blender. So we went through, and I went to about 22, right, in terms of the frames. These are all actually frames, so you can see like this is like going back here. So again, you can see that this is 0, 1, 2, this third animation, fourth animation. You see how they turn? So it looks like when we look at the rotation, then we want to get to, looks like from -1 to -10, and then to 0, and then there's an adjustment, and then it keeps jumping. And it's not the same as what we did in Blender exactly. In fact, there's a bit of a space in here. Is there some way that we could grab these frames in Unity and fix them and then bring them closer? And in fact, there is. You can actually bring all these frames closer. So example, let's say I want to grab all these. I can move those in there because they're only one away. I can give all of those. I can even modify the animation in Unity. I just want to do this really quickly so I can show you. There's not that many frames of animation, but there's enough. Oops, undo. There's enough. Right, so we can kind of grab all that. And we can grab all this, and all this, and all this, this, and this. So you can see what this does. These are different frames. Different frames do different rotations. You can actually plot out each of those rotations here. And we look at them all, starting at frame 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way. We have 11 frames of animation from 0 to 11, so it's 12 total frames. And notice that it goes from 40 to 30 and some weird wacky numbers. Okay, weird wacky numbers that happens. So why is that? Well, when you look at the animation now, so if I run it, by the way, I move them closer together. So when I look at this thing, it's going to be a little bit faster, and you're going to see a little bit of more of a skip than before, right? And the reason why you see that skip is because it's more pronounced because of the end. The end is where we're missing another animation. So again, right, what you want to do is see what the animation does. What you can do is to fix it, bring the animation down, go into the scene, and start thinking about the coin. Look at the coin. So it actually physically moves for you, right, while we're animating. So from here to here, look at that. So here, 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 here. And we want to add another one here. And what I can do is I can start here, right? And I can click this button to record, right? And then what I can do is I can move it, my scrubber to here. Then where the y-axis says 30, right? And this rotation is going to stay the same. What I can do is I can click the rotation mark here, and then I can start thinking about rotating it this way. Now be careful, because what I'm trying to do here is rotating it what I'm thinking about across the z-axis, right? So minus 30. If I stop and I do that, it might actually look worse. Let me show you what this looks like. Because I can add as many, I can even do the animation here in Unity as well, right? And I can always recast the animation in Unity. I can slow it down, right? It's got a bit of a bump to it, that's fine. But if I go to the animator, the coin rotation clip, here's my loop time, and in the coin animator, which is this, for the rotation, I can speed it, I can slow it down to like 0.5, just like we've done it in the last course. We can slow it down to half, or even slower. So let's take a look at that. There's that weird thing, right? Now we can take advantage of this little error, right? We can make it so it glows or changes color or something during that time. There's a lot of stuff we can do, or we can just fix it by redoing the whole animation clip itself here in Unity. You can totally do that even in Unity to fix problems. So I have a problem. It came in with a bad animation from Blender. Let's say we made it wrong. How do we do that? Well, we can do it ourselves in Unity, right? So let's show you how to do that. So, and then we'll stop with the animation stuff and we'll do the other thing. All right, so here's our coin, right? You can see that that's clearly all of the keyframes, right? And we could remove all the properties if I want to. So I could remove the properties, no more animation. By the way, this recalls everything. Worst case scenario though, you know the great thing is we can always get everything back from the coin model. See, the coin flip rotation is not there. It's still pretty good. So worst case scenario, I can duplicate this and bring that into the animator, and we're back to where we were. So you can't really lose anything from what we're doing, okay? So again, if I was going to record, I can start like this, a 0 frame, right? And then what I want to do is I just want to change the rotation just a little bit, okay? And you can change the rotation only around the z-axis, so which is cool, right? And then that's the first keyframe. Okay? And then we can move to the second keyframe, and we'll do it again. So now we'll sit there and say from here, right, I want to change the next thing, which is going to be around the z-axis 30 degrees. Like we said, we can move it the other way, or minus 30 is what we're thinking. We said like minus 30, which is something like that, right? And that's across the Z. We move to the next frame, and we do the same thing, right? So we say minus 60. I should change it right here, minus 60. And we move to the next one. And we keep doing that. And this is minus 90. And minus 120. Minus 120. Right? Minus 150. Minus 180. So this is how you fix it. Minus 210. And you get it. And I'm just changing it here in Unity. Now what if I came to this point? Is this enough? Is it going to skip? Do I have to go to minus 360? Well, let's stop recording and see what happens, right? So this is the coin animation still. And if I run it, we'll see what it looks like now after I've rejigged the animation in Unity. There's that skip because I missed the last frame. So like we said, actually Tatiana said it too, right? So if I look at the animation at the bottom, here's that animation, right? I've got each of these clips. So it goes 30, 60, 90, 120, 180, 210, 240, 270, 300, and then we want to move back to this point. Now be careful, if you go to 360 Is that what you want to do, or you want to go to 0? Let's try 360 and see what happens. So again, move it to this. So first, press the recording, move it to the next slot, and then change this to -360. Let's think about what this is going to do. And if I stop it and run it again, is it going to bump, or is it going to turn around? What is it going to do? Not bad, right? Looks pretty good now. And that was the problem. So we can fix the animation just like we can create the animation. Cool. Now that we have this, let's override, and if there's any override, reapply to the package. That's it. That's pretty good, right? So that same animation is being used for our coin. Our coin is save. And let's add in, so how do I do a health bar? This is a new topic. So the topic we covered so far, just to go through the stuff that we did this part. And I want to create a death plane and a spawn point for the player and a health bar, and I have only 13 minutes to do everything. Okay, how do I do that? Oh, by the way, and if I keep going and you have to leave, it's okay. I'm going to keep recording because I took a lot of time doing this part because I talked about some warming up stuff and everything else. We never have enough time to do everything that we want to do here, but that's okay. So I want to add a death plane. So when I fall, I respawn. Okay. So how do I do that? And I'll put the lab report up later. So, well, when I fall into oblivion, like way down there, right? And the way to look at it is from the side. So if I look at this from the side, right? So from a side orientation perspective, then if I zoom out way here, maybe somewhere down here is where I want to put this death plane. Way down in here. And what I want to do is, you know, I want to add that in. So I'm going to say, let's add a 3D object, a cube. Here's my cube. And what I want to do is I want to center it. So go back to reset it where it's supposed to be. I want to use my tools to bring it down to where the cube should be, somewhere down here. And maybe move it somewhere in the middle, like this, the middle of my world that I have up above. Okay, and we've done this before on 2D for those people who were with me last year or last semester, right? So again, this would like be -20 and a 10, right? From that perspective, on the Z-axis, it's 0, so it's right in the middle, right? And what I want to do is I want to scale it. Let's change this back to perspective as well. I want to scale this thing so that it looks like a plane. So what I can do is I can say on the Y, let's make it something like 0.2. And then I'll make this something like, you know, 40 across this way and 40 across this way. And then zoom out and see if that's good enough. So it's good enough for this, right? There it is. But it's got to be even wider because when I fall, I want to fall on both sides. So even bigger, this cube. This will be called the death plane. So death plane. I didn't make it a plane because you'll see why. And so we can keep going. Let's make it like 100 by 100. So kind of bigger. Again, if you were going to make this bigger, you can do that too. And this is definitely a way of doing it. You can also do it by distance. So how far on the y-axis, as an example, the player has been positioned. If the player, you know, kind of changes position less than a certain amount, respawn. Okay. Let's use a material for this, and we might be able to have a new material. Let's make a new material for this. We'll call this the death plane material. Make it red. Death plane material. And we might add something to it later. We'll change the color to red, and we'll drag and drop it onto the death plane, right? By default, the death plane, because I made it a cube, is already got a box collider, right? And what I can do is I can turn off the mesh renderer because that's just for debug purposes if I want to see the death plane. All right. So what I want to do then is when the player, right, which is my little guy here, when they collide with the death plane will respawn me back to the spawn point, which is this place right here, next to the coin. I need a place for it to respawn me, just like last time, so I'm going to add in an empty game object for that position. Let's do that. So I'll say that there'll be a new empty object, right, that I want to position at the same place as the player. And let me undo that change, so undo. Let's do it like this. Add an empty object to the player. Create empty. Inside the player, we'll call this the spawn point. Player spawn point. Hear me out now. Add 0, 0. And then what I want to do is just drag this outside the player somewhere over here. Right? The player spawn point is in the exact position of the player. Let's change this to something else. Like, for example, make it green and call it the player spawn point. You can see that the player spawn point is exactly where it was before. Okay? And we can actually move it a little bit above to make it seem like the player is falling. When they fall from up there, what happens? They'll just fall down because of gravity. So that's the player spawn point. We also need some way of telling the the player spawn point, or the death plane is going to be informed about the player spawn point, and we need to do that by keeping that somewhere. We can actually directly create a script like we did before in the last course, where I made the death plane script. So C# script, call it the death plane, right? And let's just delete that and try it again. That was terrible. Oh. Let's do that again and make a new script and call it the death plane controller. There we go. There's a death plane controller. Let it do its thing. And then take that death plane and add the death plane controller onto it. Awesome. And if I double click the death plane controller, it'll pull up Visual Studio. What I want to do is two things. I want to make use of the on collision enter, but I want to make it a trigger because the player doesn't have to actually walk on the death plane, right? So let's see how this works. We'll call this the public for now, and we'll say void on when Unity wants ReSharper changes my mind. Let's see how it goes. Absolutely, Divyesh, that's exactly right. On trigger enter, right? We want a collider other, and then from here we're going to say that if the other dot game object dot compare tag is the player, then we want you to respawn, right? We don't have the respawn method. Let's add it. For now. And we need to tell the player where to respawn to, right? So we need the respawn point. For now, this will be a good start. Just like we did before. Public game object. Actually, we really need a transform more than anything else. Transform, which is the respawn point. We'll call it player respawn. Now, for those people who remember last time, who cares? That's pretty easy because I can say that I would normally do something like the player is where I want to respawn, and so I need to send this information into here with the other game object. So if I send the other game object in there, other dot game object, this is what I want to send in. This has got to return or take in a game object as a parameter. So we'll call this the player. Right? And we can actually call this respawn player. Why not? Where we're here. And we can do that. We can say this would normally be the case because something like how about that the player, right, dot transform dot position is equal to, this is what we want to do. We want to say that the player transform position is equal to the player respawn dot position, right? We want to kind of respawn the player where it's going to go. And let's just see if it collided with the player. So we'll do a debug.log, and we'll say player collided with death plane. And this is just for debugging, so we can see that we actually got in this place right here. Okay. For now, I don't need a start or an update, right? Because the player respawn is something I'm going to drag and drop, right? So we just get rid of this for now. Okay, and all I want to do is respawn the player back where they're supposed to go. By the way, respawn, ReSharper doesn't like that. It says we should probably call it something else, right? So respawn, they're thinking it should be probably called something like respawn. Telling you, it's really particular. And even this part, it says it should probably be called respawn, but not respawn with a lowercase s. Okay, that's okay. I'm okay with that. And let's go back to Unity now and see what that looks like. So again, in the death plane, I have this respawn. It actually looks, it goes player respawn. That's pretty awesome. And I want to just grab the player object and drag him in. Oh, sorry, not the player. I want to grab the player respawn point and drag that in. So player respawn point. There it is. And if I fall, you would think that I would move, right? If I fall down there, and let's see what happens to me if I actually do that stuff. And so if I go off the deep end and I fall, then I just keep falling. And actually, I'm on this thing, and nothing happened. So I did hit this thing, and I'm down on the death plane, and there's a reason for that. Let me just take this animation window away and put it up here so you can see more. And the reason for that is because I didn't make the death plane's collider a trigger. Let's make the collider a trigger. So the collider works. We fell on the death plane, so we know that it works. But now, and also we also get this really weird message down here where it says there are 2 audio listeners in the scene, and the reason for that is because the minimap camera also has an audio listener. Let's get rid of it. So kind of remove that component, please, and save. And that should clear that message. Okay, let's try that now. So if I press play, and after I press that, and if I fall onto the death plane, then you're going to see us that, well, we collided, but it just keeps going. How come? It clearly showed that my player collided with the death plane, but it didn't change position. Does anyone know why? People that are here with me. Why didn't we change position like we did back in the last course? Right? Why we didn't, for the people who weren't part of the last course, all we really did was when the player hits the death plane, it just repositioned itself up here. Why not? Why didn't it work? Well, it has to do with, for those people who don't know, it has to do with this thing right here. Yes, Edgar, you're right. The character controller. Remember I talked about this? People love and hate the character controller. It's a love-hate relationship. In fact, most people don't like this component. Why? It is bundled. It has 2 things inside of it. It has a rigid body, and it controls the player's movement in many ways with physics and a bunch of other stuff that's going on. So we need to disable the character controller, then move the character, then enable it again. Uh-oh. This requires a little bit more work than we thought, right? Well, let's fix that problem. So again, going back to the script, we know we got the player. Here's the player. And here's the player game object. What we're going to do before we reposition it in the respawn player function is I'm going to say something like this. I'm going to say player.getComponent, and I'm going to get component the character controller, right? And I'm going to say set, I want to disable, enable, right? Enabled is equal to false. So this is disabling the character controller. Now, wait a minute, you're going to say, how do you know that the player has a character controller? Well, we know, right? That's this thing. The player is just a game object, though, so Unity doesn't know, but it's trusting that we know that there's a character controller that's part of the player, because we can get any component we want. So this is kind of like a bit of a hack. We're going to, after we move the player, so we move the player where they're supposed to go, and then after we do that, what we want to do is we want to re-enable the character controller, otherwise we wouldn't be able to move anymore. All right, so that's how it goes. And that's one extra step, guys, than what we did last semester. All right, let's move back using the character controller. Can we move using the character controller? We can do that too. We can use the move function and move us back up. But I'd rather do it this way. So let's do this. And if I move, and if I fall, then boom, I'm back. And if I fall, right, and I'm back. Then if I fall, then I'm back, right? And that works that's how it works. So if I get pushed off the edge from these dudes, right? Or if I go over here and I get like cornered somehow, right? Or if I try and move around them, but they push me off the edge, and if I fall, then I respawn. Then I respawn. Problem with respawning is these guys are right there, and they're right in my face. So what I could always do is respawn or start their position back, reset them back to where they were, or something like that. We could also have a series of respawn points, and the player would pick one of them. The death plane would pick one of a few spawn points so that the player can start fresh, right? Or restart the level, or a bunch of other stuff. Okay, but that's how you do the respawn point. Let's save this. So File, Save, and let's get rid of that little message. We know that that little message works, so this one here we don't need anymore. And let's close down Visual Studio Code because I didn't mean to open that. All right, and let's just save this. File, Save project, and we're partly done. Let's put this up on GitHub. It's just like before. We're going to go to View Changes, and we're going to stage all changes. And I'm going to say something like added death plane and respawn point. This is for testing. Again, we're building up our game slowly, every so often, every time we get together. And then we're going to push this up on GitHub. All right. That's awesome. That's fantastic. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go back into Unity. And again, if you have to go, guys, totally understand. I'm going to keep going, right? But what I want to do is I want to start by adding some tools that we need for our slide. We're going to make a slider, and we're going to start off with a piece of UI that we're going to test right here. All right. So what I want to do is we're just going to add a new UI. This is for the next piece, which is going to be a now again, there's a scroll bar and a slider. I want to add a slider, and notice that the slider gets added to the canvas, and that's okay. So let's go back to the canvas and see where that slider goes. And what is a slider anyway? So a slider is kind of what we want, right? We kind of want the slider to happen. And the way a slider works is you have a kind of a level that the slider goes to. All right, so this is how we start off with our health bar. We start with the slider. And we have our handle image, that's this piece. And we have our the knob. There's our knob, right? Which is kind of a part of the slider option. Okay, so the slider comes with the knob, and we can decide whether we want to take the handle away or not, because that just is something we can control in the canvas. So when we change the knob or that's part of the slider, then we actually change we have the fill area. This part here, the fill area, so this is part of a slider. The background, which is this, so the background, the fill area, the handle, the handle slide area, right, as well as the handle. And then we have the slider itself. So these are all the pieces that we want. So this is the multiplier, and notice down here we have a value, and the value goes from 0 maximum value to 1. We can change this maximum value to 100. Okay, and we can start this thing. We say whole numbers. That's also what we can do. Whole numbers, left to right. So we can kind of drag this left to right, which is, if I was to drag this, it would go this way, right? Left to right. We can also go right to left, right? Right to left, where I slide backwards this way, right to left. Okay. If I went left to right, and then we start off with 100, right? That's what it looks like at first. And then what we can do is when we move back, it kind of moves back to 0. So that's left to right. Okay. So the slider, this mechanism, this value is what we want to have, right? This value. And the great thing about the slider is the fill area, right? So there's the fill area. And just to show you what this is, I'm going to separate it. Here's the fill area. Okay. And the fill area has a fill, which is also an image. Okay. And if I change the color of the fill area to red, you can see the whole color is red. That's the fill area. Or the whole color is green. If I want to make the fill area green. It's the fill, image, handle area. If I took it away, then you wouldn't see the handle. That's all that's missing. The handle area is gone. And all we'd see is the fill area. Okay. We also have the background, which is this piece. And the background we can make black, right? So we can show kind of the thing that is black. One thing that we notice is also that the slider itself is curved, right? And this is an issue, right? Because we want the slider to be square. So there's other options we can choose. For example, the source image is a default source image that we're using, right? And what we want to do is this image, which is 32 by 32, is already rounded. 32 by 32 rounded image that we're going to stretch. That's what this thing is. The image type is sliced, right? We can also make it simple, right? So you can see that a simple image looks like this. We can use a sprite mesh for the simple image for the background, right? So I'm just showing you there's some things we can do, right? And the fill area, here's the fill. Again, we can say that this is a simple image, right? Take a look at the difference. We can use the sprite mesh if you want to, and it skews everything like this. So it's far better to say that it's sliced, right? Far better to say that it's sliced. Same thing with the background. Instead of a simple image, we want to go sliced. And we also want to consider the background. Let me just move the background area altogether. That it's longer than this one here, right? So I'm just going to move this up right now to something like 2021. But if I move it to 0, it's going to be the bottom, right? So you can see how wide it becomes. Again, I'm just going to show you this up here so you can see this. So if I undo, let's undo, and undo, you can see that it's 0, 0, right? So if I drag it up again, you can see that it's this, right? From a width perspective, right, it basically shows us a top, and it has stretch. That's what it says. There's a stretch value. And what it is if I go back to 0, just to show you this stuff, oops, undo. If I go back to the bottom, which is 0, or if I undo, and the top, let's go undo, undo. There's the top and the bottom. What I want to do is for the slider itself is got its own rect transform, but the background is also stretched around the slider width. And the slider has a width right now of 160. Okay, that's totally fine. 160 and 20. If I made it 160 and 30, the slider would be thicker, and I think it might look better this way. So the background has a stretch value, but the fill area, right, starts at to the right 15 and the bottom 0 and the left 5. If I made this to 0 and this would be 0, you can see that that is also stretched, right? And the fill area is also part of the slider. So we can always go to, instead of stretch, we can go to center. There we go. And then what I can do is I can change the fill which is this piece. Instead of it stretching, right, we can also go to center. And now you can see that the fill is 160 with a height of 16. The fill area is 160 with a height of 16. The background is, we don't have a width for yet, but we're going to undo this. We're going to go to here, and we're going to go to Alt and then center. So we've centered everything. Hear me out. And what we want to do is, now that everything is 160, background is 160, fill area is 160, fill is 170. That's too much. Let's move this to 160. So it's kind of matched with the other one in the background, like so. Okay, so on the front it's 160, on the back it's 160. And then what happens when I use the slider now? So if I use the slider and we go from 100 down to 0, it kind of exposes this back part, right? See how the back part is let's go into 2D mode so you can see it. It's not quite as tall as this thing. So let's do that. So background, so we see that the slider itself is 30, background is 16. Let's go to 30, right? The fill area is 16. Let's go to 30. And that's an issue. The fill is -8 from the bottom. Let's rejig how this should be aligned. Let's see how this works here, right? And again, I just want to show you the stretch. It stretches up. So let's not stretch it, but center it for now so we can see how this works. And now we have everything the same. The problem with this is that when I go to my slider and I go to 0, it's, kind of looks like this. When I'm straight, it goes all the way like this. All right, so again, I'm putting this in place, so we're going to set up a slider so when I go back to back, it's going to show that I have no value here anymore at all, right? That's how you kind of adjust it. Again, let's go back to the slider. Slider is 160 and 30. The background, 160 and 30, right? And the position is also important, 0, 0, 0, okay? Now it starts there, and this is something to also note, right? So it starts there, and then take a look at the scale. That's also important. Fill area is 111, 160. The fill is -15 and -15 on the bottom. So this should be 0 and 0. And it's also stretched, which we don't want it to be. We want to make it so it's this, right? We don't want to stretch this thing. So we've kind of done this a couple of times now, and we keep noticing that as soon as I move the slider again, just to show you this thing, so let's move this back down here. As soon as I move the slider down up to 100, bad things happen to good people, and the background or the fill area seems to stretch again. It stretches up. So this is what we want to do, and it's an effect of what we're doing. The slider itself moves everything around. Thank you so much. Okay, it moves everything around. So what I want is, I'm just showing you this thing so you know what the components of the slider are and that we can use it in the way that we want to use it. And we've removed the handle because we don't really need the handle anymore either. Let's get back and put it back the way it was. So again, I'm just going to delete the slider, right? And let's add another one in because it's the fastest way to do it. So we're going to say UI slider, okay? Let's move the slider to where we need it to be here. Okay, there it is, okay? Just so we see it right now. Again, the components. Background, we want to make it black. Okay, so black, black, black. Foreground, or the fill area, right? This fill area, we want to make that color green. Right, so the color is green, background's black, right? And we want to take the handle and hide it. When we move the slider itself down below, we want to go from 0 to 100, where 100 is the max and 0 is the min. When I move this up, this value, it covers everything except for this last little part. And the reason why it doesn't cover this last little part is because that's where the handle would be, typically. It would be kind of a little bit ahead of everything else. The slider itself is 20 in height. I can make the whole slider 30 in height to make it more reasonable. And the background fill, which is stretch to fill, although it's the background fill is the way it is, we're going to take it back to this stretch in a second. But what I want is if I took the background back to the middle, you're going to see that the background was 160 and 16. That's the height. Okay? And so 160 and 16, where the slider is 160 and 30 for the height. The background looks pretty good though, because even though it's 160 and 16, and the pivot looks like it's 0.5, right? One thing to note is that the fill area is offset because it's 15 from the right and 5 from the left. Okay, that's what it looks like. So if I was to reset this and put it at 0 and then 0, you're going to see that it stretches too much because it's got a stretch value. Okay, let's undo those changes. I like this, but what about if I change this to 5? Then it's exactly perfectly fitting over this part, which is what we want. Going back to the slider, if I move this back, you're going to see it goes all the way here to this piece, but that doesn't seem to be 0. It's got to be completely flat, right? So this is the default way it works. Okay. So then how do I, first of all, let's get rid of the handle. We know we don't need that because we're not going to modify it. So delete the handle, right? We'll call this a health bar. Health bar. And right now what it is in our canvas, which is inside of screen space. That's where it is, okay? And let's suppose that the character, the player, is going to have his health bar be here, and we're going to put it at the top. That's his health bar. So when I run around, you're going to see what it looks like. It's going to be at the top of the screen. So kind of at the top, or wherever we want it, at the bottom, and it's going to have his little health bar somewhere, wherever we want to put it. The key for the health bar, if I kind of go to it, is when I look at it in 2D, it's got to be exactly where I want it to be, right? So if I'm going to put the health bar, let's say at the bottom or the top or wherever I want it to be, and typically we want it so that it is probably close to where we normally have it, right? A lot of times health bars are either at the top or the bottom left or something, and that's okay. We don't have anything at the bottom left right now, so let's put this at the bottom left. And we want to kind of make it so that there is text along with it. So let's add in some text in the health bar. So canvas, and we'll add in some UI text. And the text that we're going to add in is going to be towards the bottom here for now. I'm just eyeballing it. And again, when we look at it from the scene point of view, right, if I was going to play, we'll see how big it is, if it makes sense, right? New text. And that new text is going to be the health bar label, or health bar text. Health bar label. We'll call this health. And we'll also do one of these, health. I also want to make it so that it is sent kind of like the anchor is in the bottom left corner of the screen. So when I click the bottom left corner of the screen as the anchor for the health bar. As same thing for the health bar itself. The health bar right now is next to here. We're going to make it so that the anchor is right here. So again, I can choose a bottom left anchor. So if I move the screen, it's always going to be here at the bottom left corner of the screen for me. If I find that the health bar is too skinny, so if I go back there and I go to like if I look at the health bar and it's too skinny, I can make it bigger. So let's make it so that it is fatter. So we'll make it so from 30, we'll make it so that it's 50. There we go. And from 160, we'll make it 200, just to make it more proportional. Okay, something that looks like this. And we'll put it at the same level as the health bar text, the health bar label. So the health bar label is at X is 143 and Y is 66. So we'll make it something like 60. And we'll put the health bar itself at 60 as well for now. There we go. So that's the position. Height is 50, width is 200. And if you think that this is not wide enough, or if you want this to be closer, we can certainly do something like that. So if I kind of go back, you can see what it looks like. Now notice how it's a little bit lower than the health bar itself. So player health. And how do we put this up? So again, click in the health bar. We could adjust it based on our view. I could kind of zoom in here and just adjust it so that it makes more sense. Right, something that looks like that. We don't have a number, but we could put the number here as well, whatever that number is going to be. So I could add the health bar value that's kind of output here as well. So let's say health bar label, right, and the health bar value. Let's add that in. I'm going to take that label and Control D. So copy that label, put it across to where this is right here. So we have the same style and the same position. And then change that to health bar value here. Health bar value. And move it across. I'll be okay. And again, what we want to do is we want to center it. I want to make it the same size as the health bar. So something that looks like this. And then change the value, the height value. First we'll make it so that it's auto-sized. And we'll change the height value so that it fits inside that region. And we'll change that so instead of saying health, it reads a number, like 100%. Right? And then the way it's going to work is when the health value, the label changes, or sorry, the health bar changes, it has a value property. And so when it goes down to this, as it goes down, as it drops down, you can see that there is a problem. Because even though we've changed the size of my health bar, right, the stuff behind, which is back on here, has not stretched. So we can go back now and take the health bar, right? Now this is like us fixing the problem again. And for the background, we want it to stretch. So we're going to stretch kind of this way and this way, both ways. So it kind of fits. And let's see now if it works. So we're going to go back, and if I kind of go back there, no, it's not cool. Let's go back to the background. And the background is stretched. So it says 20 on the right and 17 for the bottom value. I don't want a color transition. I want none. I want no color transition. I want to turn that off. Interactable, I don't want to make it interactable, so you can't touch it, right? So that way it'll take away things like the ability for you to touch that health bar, because we don't need it to be interactable, right? So here's the fill, which is a rect transform. There it is. And again, that fill, right, that we have here is also going to be stretched. So this is stretched. The background's going to be stretched. The fill area is also going to be stretched, but only on this side. So if I make it stretch this way, it's going to actually fill up that whole area, right? And then the idea is that when it works, when the health bar works, if I drag this here, then it's going to actually show a total black background in the background. So the health bar itself, which is the fill area, and then the background, right? So a way to combat this, because the background is exactly like the fill area, but it's actually just black, is to get rid of the background and add it back in. So let's do that. So we'll get rid of the background, and then take the fill area, duplicate it, and pull that back in. Right, there's the fill area. And then the thing with it is this part, which is the fill value. Okay, so the height is 0, and the this part starts off. Let's just do that again. Undo, 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 undo. One more time. One more time. Let's go put this back to max. So again, the health bar at max. We'll get that fill area right here, and we'll duplicate it. And then if I was to put the health bar at min, it still stretches, right? So that's that fill bar right here. But the fill is what I want to duplicate. So Control D, duplicate that fill, and bring it into the health bar itself, right? And then what happens when I killed this one? Delete. Then what I can do is, if I was to use the health bar, you're going to see it should stay somewhat green, right? Because the fill, which is green, is the width is 10. And what we can make it is, the width is whatever the width of the thing is. We will make it stretch. So stretch. See how that works. So that should mean that the fill is 190. That's good. And let's try that again. So that's good. And there's the fill. Color value. What if I was to hide this? Can I see the fill afterwards? Why is that? 190, 12, 0, and raycast target. Maskable. We don't want to make that maskable or sliced. Fill center. Filled. I just want to show or hide this thing. So where is the fill area? Why is it invisible? Call transparent mesh. Whereas the fill itself, or the background, is also that way, but it's black and it's maskable and it's sliced. And it's a background image. Source is background. Right, I think I can do the same thing with, if I add in an image, and I made that source is background. That's right, background. And I went to stretch, so stretch that stuff out. And I started off at 0 and 0. On left was 0 and 0. This is kind of what I want. And the color being black, let's go to black, and the alpha is 100, that might look exactly how I want it, and that'll be the background. And I can just get rid of this background, goodbye, delete. And then the fill area I can bring back, and it has nothing to do with the background, but I can make the background image, which is so big, let's make that a product. Make the height of the background only stretch that way, but not the other way. Let's try that. So go to stretch this way, and not the other way. So if I was to take that image, actually this is stretched again. One sec. Let's just not stretch it, and we'll just modify it first. Pull it in. This, and then we'll stretch it this way. So stretch it as it goes that way, but we'll keep the size the same. That's pretty good. So let's do that. So let's go stretch across this way, and let's see how that works now when I hide this image. Yeah, that's what I want. Good. So that's what I've done there. I can make the background longer for sure. I can totally do it longer. But now we call this background. Background. We've got a fill, which we can get rid of. We don't need that one. Delete. And we've got the fill area, which is right here, and the fill that's below there. The fill area and the fill are related because that's something we can program. And what we can do is the health bar gives us a value, and what we can do is we can start off the health bar at 100. When this value drops, whatever it drops down to, we can jig this piece right here to show what it's going to show. Okay, and we can do that with the on value changed event. All right, so let's view it again. So again, we can view that, and there it is. We can see that the health bar is there, and if we get hurt, it's going to go down, right? So the way it would work is when this goes down, right, then this number would change. Okay, let's do that. So let's make a little script for the health bar, and we can put it anywhere we want. Okay, typically what we want to do is put it in another object, nothing to do with these. So what I can do is I can go create a new empty, which we'll call the game controller. Typically that was what we would do. And then what I would do is I would go into my scripts, and notice I have my UI controls. I can connect my UI controls onto my game controller. And one thing with the UI controls is that it says that on start button pressed, you know, scene manager load, whatever. But this on button press has nothing to do with any particular thing. I'm not connecting it to anything. Let's add another thing. So we'll say public void. We'll say on health bar changed. Right, we'll make a new script. And what we'll do is we want to get a reference, you know, as an example to the health bar value that's changed as well, right? We want to get that value, and I want to get reference to the health bar. So I want to kind of do something like this, right? Public, and we'll say the health bar, public game object. Now again, this is something that is kind of like a UI slider, so we want that information using Unity Engine. If I go UI, this is nice, but remember it's actually TMP, my Text Mesh Pro, right? So TMP is what I want, but I want to try doing UI because that's normally how I do it. And what I want is a slider, right? So public, you know, slider. We'll call this the health bar for now, health bar. And let's suppose that when, you know, we change something, the health bar value is what we really care about. When this health bar changes, then I want to, there's the health bar itself, as well as I also want to get a public reference to the, now this is TMP, Text Mesh Pro. So TMP, and TM Pro dot, and you can see that it has text, right, or label or something like that. So TMP Pro, Text Mesh Pro, is what we want. TM Pro, and Text Mesh Pro is a namespace. That's the Text Mesh namespace, right? So we want to include Text Mesh Pro up here. So let's go using Text Mesh Pro. We want to do that for sure. And then I know that the text is what I want. So TMP underscore text, which is the health bar value, which is what we want, health bar value. So those two things we want. But the thing is, because we're using the UI, this thing called UI controls is also shared by the main menu, and health bar and health bar value wouldn't exist, right? These two values don't exist. So we want to make sure that these two values exist, right, as an example. And if they don't, if there's no nothing in there, then what we want to do is we want to say something like, you know, but this is only when this thing is activated. So we'll see. Maybe it won't affect us. Let's see how it goes. Okay. So health bar and health bar value. Let's just start off with some basics, and then we'll say what happens when the health bar change event happens. So I want to connect my UI controls. Here it is. Okay. So it says health bar and health bar value. There's nothing. And if I was to go to my canvas, here it is, and I have my health bar, which is this slider. and health bar value, which is TMP Pro text, this one. So I got those two elements, and if I press play now, let's see if it actually does give me an error or anything like that. No, we're good to go so far, right? And then when I say, well, if the health bar value's changed, I want to take the health bar value and attach it to the health bar, the actual health bar value that's in there, and do that. So I'll say health bar value dot text is equal to the health bar dot value dot toString. So that's what I want. Okay, so it says, probably don't have to do that because specify string culture explicitly if I want to. I don't recommend that. You can also do that here. It'll give you some example. Use current culture, right? But it's not required. Okay, let's see what happens when I do this. And again, what I want to do is, now that we have our game controller that has our UI controls, then what I want to do is in the health bar itself, this health bar, it has an on value changed event right here. I'm going to click on whole values here for a second. And I want to click on the plus, and I want to drag and drop my game controller on there. And then I want to choose UI controls on health bar changed, which activates that thing. Whenever I change this, it's going to update this. Let's see if how that works, if it does work, or if I get an error. So let's suppose this changes now, then we should have this changing, right? And it doesn't. So this event doesn't trigger this, or something went wrong. So let's see how that works. So we'll say, notice that the on health bar changed event, although it's been here, is, let's see that we'll do a debug.log, and we'll say health bar value changed, because something's going wrong here. Cool. I'll run it, and even from here, when we change it, it should be something that changes the value here, right? It should change our adjustment. So here's the maximum value, but you clearly see that this doesn't enact or trigger this event, the on health bar value changed event. Because if it did, right, then as we move this one, then this would trigger. That's all it would do. This is how it works, right? This is the trigger. When this moves, you know, as an example, then my health bar number should change, or even I should get an event that's listed here. My game controller, again, has these two values, and I want to, you know, my health bar slider, it doesn't matter about these two things, but even so, my UI controls, which is this one, number one is grayed out, which is not a great sign. If it's not grayed out, typically I'd be like, okay, cool, you know, I got that. Just like our start button. If I go to the start button, let's just go back to the play scene for a second, just to show you this. So if I went back to the play scene, which is the start scene, so let's go back to start, save, and notice if I press, you know, play, I shouldn't get an error anymore. If I click start, it just takes me to the next stream, because that UI control works, right? But I'm trying to listen for a health bar, a changed event, right? So let's go back into the main. I'm listening for this to change, right? That's what I'm doing. In the canvas area, I've got my health bar, right? And I've got a value changed event, right? And I'm looking for this value to change, right? When my controls change. So I'm clicking on this thing altogether, right? So that's how it works for this one here, okay? So why isn't it triggering? That's the first thing. How come it's not triggering? And that's what we have to figure out. It's not interactable, and there's no transitions. It's not navigatable, right, or whatever. But we can change this value, and it should work. To test this, let's add another health bar. So let's add another health bar. And it could be other reasons. So if I go UI and if I go slider, right, and here's my slider down here, right, and let's connect this same thing. We'll make the same slider connected to that thing over there. And let's just see that I can get the same game controller in there. Here's my game controller, and we'll say that it's going to call the on health bar changed event, this one, on health bar changed event. And let's save that and go back to my code and just comment this line out. Because let's suppose that I don't have these right now. Okay, so it's just I only want to just check this thing here, my public void on health bar changed event. I want to get that working before I do anything else. Okay, so let's do that. And press play. And if I was to change this event, so I notice that I can't modify this because when I press my mouse button, my cursor is turned off. What about when I go to 1? Does it change this? Well, no, it doesn't. So let's go back and put this to 1. Let's make this to 100. Turn it to 1. There we go. And then let's try it out again. So if I press play, and if I want to modify, and again, this I'm just showing you this so you can see that this would work normally. If I modify this, then we should get a changed event happening. It says on value changed, and I'm calling this function. So what do you think can be the issue? It should, yeah. Whether you change it from the editor or whether you change it in the game, it shouldn't matter, right? And the way to check this is inside of the, I can turn off, the reason why I can't do this is because when I click on the screen, my mouse disappears, and I can change that inside of the player controller. So if I just temporarily, if I go to scripts, and if I go to the, the camera controller, if I'm not wrong, we lock the cursor. Let's not lock the cursor just temporarily for a second. And let's try it again. Because I'm listening for an event. If the event doesn't trigger, then we don't want to use this thing, right? Okay, now it changes here, right? Because we made it interactable. And that's what it should work like. But we want to make it work so that if I change it, as an example, in the canvas in the editor, right? So I change it in the editor as an example here. So let's go into that health bar, or the slider, right? And let's just clear this. And if I change it here, right, the value of the slider, then it should change. Okay. Here's another thing to change. Even if it doesn't change here, right, then what it should do is, what if I changed it manually? So in other words, if I said something like in the UI controls, right, I told the health bar value to change. So if I said something like, when I start off, right, I take some damage. So let's say we'll call this health bar dot value, which is going to trigger the change, is going to equal to 20. So I'm going to change the value to 20. All right, see what happens there if I do that. Because health bar itself is something that is here, right? So if I change the health bar, then the health bar value should change, which is here. And we should trigger this health bar to change as well. So let's see if we change it with a value, does it change it as well? And for this, let's get rid of the slider. This slider here, we'll just untag it from the scene. So this whole thing, just in case there's a problem. And when we run it, let's see what happens in real time. Does it change the value of the slider at all? So can I change that value at all, right? That's what I'm saying. Is there a way to change that value? Because right now, when I change the value, you can see clearly like nothing happens, right? And let me just make sure that the game controller is working. And that is probably one of the issues. Probably the issue is when I'm running this thing, let's go back and change the health bar. Make sure I'm changing the right health bar. Yeah, that works. But I can't seem to activate the health bar itself. So health bar is a slider, Is there a TMP version? No, I thought there was only a slider in there. Undo. And I'm just curious. How about we just print out the value of my health bar? So let's do a instead of value, let's do a debug.log, and let's read the health bar value. Health bar dot, let's see what it says here. Okay, there's the on value change. That's the event, slider event. We can add that. We can add that manually. But what I want to do is there maybe a set control or something like that to make it happen? So let's go with value, and let's see what that looks like. Because value should be a property. It's a float, yeah. On value changed. And I won't do normalized value. This is printed out when I come into there. So as soon as I enter the UI controls, I make it run. Okay, so canvas, cool, health bar label, health bar value, health bar. Did I drag the right one? I think so. And let's get rid of the slider because we know it works when we interact with it, but we don't want it to be interactable. We just want this value, this one right here, this health bar value to be captured. Whole numbers, left to right. We don't care about the rects, and we don't want it interactable. Transitions, navigation, none. I don't think there should be any navigation on this thing. Can you visualize? Yeah, we don't care. All right, so play, and it should give me the value down there, and it does not. Look at that. It does not give me the value. So it's like either there's no value or there's no health bar. Because even when I go here, value dot, okay, Unity slider value, sure. Perfect. Slider value, and I bet you I did the exact same thing. Sliders main slider, debug slider value. Looks good to me. Submit slider settings, and this is not right. Let's go to the current version and see what that looks like. So we'll go to slider, constructor, slider value, T value type, yeah, so it can be any type I want. The value associated with the field, page size, range, the actual value of the slider. Here's the actual value of the slider. Okay, cool. Binding. What has changed that this doesn't work? Because this should be done, guys. It should be over. And scripting API is what we want. Slider. I may have to come back and look it up and find out what the problem is, because this should not be an issue, guys. I might be missing something. I tried changing the value of the slider at start function of controls and it worked, so I'm guessing changing the value in the inspector doesn't trigger the changing event. Yeah, but I tried it and mine doesn't work for some reason. So I'm wondering what that problem is if mine doesn't work, because I'm getting a slider health bar value. I'm debugging log right here. Oh wait, of course not. I'll be okay. So let's do that again. We'll go public start or private start. Yeah. Private start. We don't need visual scripting right now. Private void start. Thank you for that, guys. And we'll do the same thing. We'll say health bar dot value is equal to 20. And let's see if that works. That should activate the health bar and change the value to what we want, which is exactly how it should be working. Let's see if that was right. That's what happens when you're coding live. There it is. So that totally worked. And that's how it should work. So the health bar, if we get hit, right, then we can take damage. Excellent. So because the on health bar changed event works, we can, in my UI controls, again, this is just getting it to work, like I said. I know, eh? Let's make a public value called change health bar, or change take damage, which will be returning void take damage, and we'll have a value of damage, so some kind of damage would be, which would be an integer. And what we'll say is we'll read the health bar value. Let's get rid of this, we don't need this right now. But we'll say the take damage event, what it will be is when we take damage, then we will change the health bar value to something else. We'll say that the health bar value, so we'll say float health, or well, I'll make an int, we'll read it, int health is equal to the health bar dot value. And we want to, when we read it in, it's a string, so we want to int dot we want to parse int dot parse, there we go, int dot parse, and we want to parse that health bar value, and we want to make sure we cast it to string. So we cast it to string and link it back. So this changes it to an integer, and then what we want to do is we want to subtract the damage. We'll say health minus equal to damage, and then we'll put it back out there. We'll say health bar value, health bar dot value equals to whatever the new health is, right? So whatever that health is, this becomes what this is. And then once we've done that, that will lower the health every single time for take damage. Okay? And the way to do this is just a hack, just to make sure that the health bar starts to work, right? Is we want to serialize system.serialize. I want to do that. UI controls, right? And this is inside of game controller, right? So this is kind of UI controls, which is inside the game controller method, right? So we want to make a reference to the UI controls, let's say inside of our player. So going back to our player, there we go. Then in the player behavior, let's just say, right? We will make a reference to the health bar. Now again, you want to make a reference to the UI controls for now, because that's what it's called. Header, and we'll say health system. This is the first part of the health system. And we'll just say something like public reference to a UI controls, which we'll call controls. And what we'll say is that if I collide, right, if I collide with the other object, which is, you know, our friends, the enemies, take damage. So we'll say a public void on trigger, it's not trigger, on collision enter, and we'll say from a collision perspective other, when they're touching me, then I will do something like controls dot take damage, and we'll say every single time we get hit, we'll take 10, and see how that works. There's on collision enter 2D, on collision enter equivalent, right? So when other, I'll say if other dot compare tag dot game object dot compare tag, is the enemy. Anytime we hit the enemy, then controls take damage. For now, that's how we're going to make it work, because that'll make the health bar work when we take damage. And again, this is a hack. We'll create our health system later on with more details in this. All right. Okay, so let's also turn back on our cursor lock, because that was just to make sure we can configure stuff. I was trying to check things out. That's nice. Excellent. And if we did things properly now, then if our enemies, let's make sure the enemies are coded as an enemy. They're not. Let's make a new tag for enemy. Enemy. And then I'll select both robots and make them so that they're both enemy types. And we'll also do overrides apply all. There we go for both. And then what that'll do is if they touch us, we'll take damage. Let's try this out and see if that works or if it doesn't. So let's search them out. And if they touch us, then we should, if we have some kind of collider, then enemy doesn't touch us. What's going on? On collision enter. Okay, let's check to see if they're touching us. So let's go back to the player behavior. This is the next part. Player behavior. On collision enter, collision other game object compare tag as enemy. And we want to make sure that this works. And one of us have to have a rigid body? I think we do. So let's make sure that this is working. So we'll say something like, here, we'll do a debug log. Collision with enemy. And did we make a reference to the UI controller, or is it not a thing? So I think player, I never made a health control thing, which means I got to drag and drop this. That might be the issue. And let's try it again. But we may have never collided properly either, because maybe we don't collide. You can clearly see there's a collision, but I think that I'm not seeing any kind of collision at all. Well, we're seeing the collision, but it's not detecting the collision. On controller collider hit. You should use. Okay, let's try that. I like that. Because the controller, that's right. Because it's a controller. Haha, it's the same thing. Public void on controller collider hit. Thank you. Right, and let's look that up just to make sure I get the right thing. On controller collider hit. There it is. Character controller on controller collider hit. And it's the collider hit with the rigid body. And I want to get, well, once I have the rigid body, I think if body's null, kinetic, hit movements. And I want to get the, if it hits, hit dot collider, oh, okay, dot attach rigid body. Hit dot collider, I bet you it's hit dot collider dot game object. So collider, controller hit, let's just grab this whole thing. I bet you that's what it is. So if we do this, thank you for that. Then what we want to say that we want to get the hit collider if hit dot collider dot game object dot compare tag, that's how we do it, is this. So we're going to use, that's right, we're using the character controller again. See what happens when you use the character controller? Bad things happen to good people, and this doesn't fire anymore. This doesn't trigger because there is no proper collider without this, if I'm not wrong. Let's try this out. And let's see if this works now. Thank you, Edgar. Again. I'll be okay. It's just been a long recording. And let's try this out. And da-da-da. And yeah. Okay. There. Did I not do the robots properly? They're enemies. Yeah. And why is it not detecting? Is it because I'm... So if hit collider game object compare tag. How about if hit? Let's do that thing that it says. Let's do a debug.log hit. And I think you should be able to convert that to, if there's something like that, public void on controller collider hit. And that because our object has a controller, that should work. Edgar. Let's try it one more time. Okay. So it's hitting because I'm on the ground. So that is happening. And let's also do hit dot collider dot game object dot name. So we'll see what we know. We know what we're hitting. It seems like the enemies are not colliding with us. And maybe it's because they have a different kind of collider. Do they even have a collider? Okay, cool. Robot body. Look at that. All right. So that is good. But they collide, but somehow the tag isn't thing. Okay, it's fine. So we can just do it that way on name. It's not optimal, but it works. So we'll say that if the hit collider game object.name, it's not really the way I want to do it. Name is equal to robot body. Because robot body is the thing that's in here, yes. If that's true, then collision with the robot, take damage. Okay, let's try that out and see if that is okay. It's colliding with the child and the child have default tag. Yep, that's right. Because the child is this thing. That's right. Correct. You're absolutely correct. As always. It looks like you're on the ball there, my friend. So let's do apply all. So now that the robot body also is an enemy, and we can probably use that compare tag in the future. Let's do that. But we don't care. We just want to make this work. So and boom. Yeah, it went right down because of our hit, and the reason why is because we kept on being hit. Okay, let's try that. But it worked. That's good. So let's try it one more time. And we can also see if we're already in collision, then we don't take the same hit. Let's see what happens when it hits us. Boom. Yeah, it went right down. And the reason why is because it's so fast that when we hit, we're in collision all the time, right? So that's why it works. So if I'm already colliding, this is why the hit is happening, because the hit is happening every single time. And what we need to check to see is when we get hit, then we're already colliding. So I can kind of make a kind of thing that where is colliding. So a public, let's say public bool is colliding, which equals to false, right? And then when we get hit, if the hit is true, then is colliding is true. So if this is true, and if it's not already colliding, if not is colliding, and this is happening, then to that, make it so that it is colliding is equal to true. So we set colliding as true, which is kind of a little hack again. And then what we need to do is make it so it's false. So if I hit, but I'm not hitting the robot body, so if it's not is colliding, it's like I'm far enough away when I'm leaving, and this is where the exit would be nice, but we don't have that. So we can take damage once. Let's see if we can take damage once. So that's what it'll be right now, and we'll work out the health bar later. Yeah, but then the on controller, but that should still work though. That should still work. We could, so here's something else we could do, Edgar. We could, even though we have the health, the health bar and all that stuff, we could put the script, the on controller hit and all this stuff on the body of the robot. So this health system, instead of putting it here with UI controls, here's something else we could do, because this is based on this thing. We don't want to put it here. What we want to do instead is make a health controller. Let's do that, and then we'll finish this off, guys. So I know about you, but you might be getting tired like me. So let's do a C# script. We'll call this the health controller, and the health controller script will be on the robot body, right? Because then it has this box collider, which it makes sense. So health controller on the box collider. Oh, I hate when that happens. Delete. And it won't happen because of these, because of this. Let's just get rid of this. I know what to do. Because doing all that stuff is pretty insane when we do that. If I was going to use the hit controller, that doesn't exactly do what I want it to do. And again, going back to what we said about how ugly the character controller is, it's good and it's bad, and this is one of the bad things. Health controller. Let's do that again. Wait for it. There it is, and put it as part of the robot body. Health controller. Excellent. And now what we'll say is on the robot, we'll override apply all, so all of them have it just before we go. And then there's the health controller, which will do the same thing. We'll go that we'll need a public reference to the UI control. UI controls, we'll call it control for now. Controls. And what we want to say is we don't need any of this, because what we're going to do is we're just going to use the public void on collision. We can do this on collision, enter collision other, and we'll just see what it says. Debug.log collision, just to see that it's on the right spot, because if this doesn't work here, who cares about the controls? Because it should work. It should work because the robot body has a collider, right? Robot body has a box collider, and it's not trigger, right? So let's drag and drop the controls to it, which is the game controller, and I'll do the other one too, just so it doesn't cause an error for now. I'm just curious if this is going to work differently. And if I collide with something that has a collider, then does it work? Nope. And I think what's happening is if I go back to the player, what's happening is the player itself, it doesn't have a collider on it. So what we need to do is either put a trigger collider on the player, which is separate than the actual collider, and we'll use it that way. So that is the other way we can do it. So it looks like the robot body, it doesn't collide, because by the time it collides, and it's a trigger, one or the other, either the robot body, as an example, or the robot has to have a rigid body, and we have a rigid body, or the player has to have a rigid body. We do have a rigid body that's built into the character controller, so it should work. And that means that the the robot body is going to be the thing that triggers the collision, right? Triggers the collision. It is a trigger, and that means that the script is going to be different. Health controller. So instead of on collision enter, it's on trigger enter. On trigger enter, and we'll make this a collider instead of a collision. Collider, and let's see if it works now. Trigger with 2 G's, how about that? And let's run that and try it again. Can we collide without using that character controller? Or do I have to put a controller on there? Yay! That's what I wanted. Okay, so if that's true, then, and we can figure out the collision so far. So we have, so we can add another collision trigger collider on the robot, and that trigger collider will be the thing that does it. So we can say something like controls dot take damage 10. Okay, and that should work now. Okay, so that's the beginning of what we're going to do. Nice. And let's try it out. And we should be able to go here and boom, 90. Boom, 80, 70, 60. Much better. Right? Now, we don't have a collider, but that's okay because we made this a trigger collider on the robot body. But we can easily make the trigger on the nav mesh agent, on the robot itself, which would be okay. Which would be okay because it has a trigger, and that's something we can do as well. So there you go. Crazy, right? And we're not checking. We could also say that if the other, just to make sure, if other dot game object dot compare tag is enemy, which is what we said, then and only then do you want to take control damage. So we can put this little script. Now that we've written the script, we can put it on anything. So we can take it away from the robot body and put it on the robot. So let's make this not a trigger again. Let's make this a real collider. We'll put the trigger on the robot, right? Because we never did that. So we'll say box collider. The only problem with this is that it doesn't have the shape remove component. Let's put that on the robot body as well. We can do two. One which is a trigger and one which is a real collider. So you can't pass through it. I mean, you could, right? So we could duplicate components. So we could copy component, and I wonder if it would copy the values as well. Let me just check to see if that would be it. And then we would paste component as new, right? Paste component as new. Yep, cool. So let's go, where is that robot? Robot. So box collider, and but it's not the right size because it doesn't have it. No, it can't be like that. Remove component. No, we'd have to put it on the same one. So we'd have to copy and paste this. So copy component, and then paste component as new. Would be right here, the exact same thing. One would be a trigger, and one would be a regular one for now. And we could have the robot body act on the trigger, which is right here. And let's just do the robot thing and say overrides apply all, which means that this one would also have to. One's trigger, one's not. And let's see if that would work. But may have to change the physics. Let's see what happens. So we shouldn't be able to pass through it anymore, and we should be able to take damage. But the trigger would have to be bigger, because otherwise the collider will hit first, and that's not what we want. So let's go to the robot body And let's change the box collider from a trigger. Oh, isn't that interesting how it doesn't allow you to edit both? Huh. Look at that, guys. That's new. This one doesn't have an editor. Maybe I'd have to make it a different size or a different type instead of a box collider itself. So let's delete, remove component. It's been a journey so far. Because the box collider has something already, let's add something that's bigger than the box collider. So we'll go to the, well, we could add it here. It doesn't really matter where we add it, but it should be the robot itself. So if I go to add component, we'll go to collider, make a maybe a capsule bigger, capsule collider. Well, that's not bad. And we'll make it bigger. So we'll modify the capsule. This one you can modify. And we'll make it so that the capsule is on the y-axis. Yep. Flip it on the x-axis. There we go. Yeah, because it's a Unity thing, because it's a Blender thing. And we'll say that this is going to be wider. But we need it to be wider than the robot, which is slightly wider than the robot itself for the trigger. And it's got to be around the same size. We don't care about the depth as long as the collider is literally just a little bit wider than the other one. And that should be a big enough hack so that way it'll trigger first before the other one does. There we go. Okay, and let's do the last part, which is go back to the robot and go to overrides and go to apply all. Almost done. Thank you for waiting for all this time. Amazing. You guys are amazing. And let's see if it works. So, boom. And does it collide? No, it doesn't. Why not? Why not? Why not? Why not? So, robot body has a capsule. It's colliding. And it's a trigger. The script was working before. It's connecting with a rigid body. Smaller. Did it work for you? I don't think so. If you make it smaller than the box collider, then I'm wondering if it's the filter that I'm using. Collider on trigger enter, collider other, if compare tag is enemy. Oh, this is the problem. So this health collider controller, it can't be the compare tag enemy. It's got to be the compare tag player. Ha 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 ha. I'll be okay. Because the player, it's the robot, it's got, this is the thing that's got it. So the trigger is going to be colliding with the player. I'll be okay. Which is this. And run it. Did I save? I saved. Run away, run away, run away, and yes, 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 yes. Works now. Okay. All right. So again, I think there's some things we can take it further. Obviously, if I go down to 0 health, I'm not going to show that. But so things that I did just to figure this out. And again, I'll put the lab report on so you can see it. I made a collider, a trigger collider on the enemy robot that's slightly bigger than the box collider. The box collider is used for physical collisions. The trigger collider is used for, taking damage, right? As an example, and I'm doing that because it has a rigid body, right? And this way, I don't have to use the character controller that's on the player, but rather the trigger collider that's on the robot, which is kind of a little better in some ways. Okay, so that's what it does. And it makes it a little easier where I can attach the health controller on anything I want. Call it whatever you want, right? But now it's on the robot. I could also make it on the player too, and I just have to add a trigger collider. And what I might do later on after this is do that. But right now, we can clearly see that it works at this point. So how does it work? Again, you can make it work either way. I would accept, because we've talked about it a bunch of ways. One way is when you're colliding with, you can put it on the a health controller on the enemy, right? Or you can put a health controller on the player. It's up to you. But you should see, one of the goals is to see that the health bar is physically going down. Okay, if I fall down on the, as an example, you can see that I'm still taking damage. On the death plane, right, or if I do that, then I can reset. If I respawn, as an example, or if I take enough damage, you can also make it so that the enemy or the player can respawn in its new location. All right, any questions for those people that are here? Thank you so much for being patient with me, but this is it. So again, I will post the things, but if you followed what I did for the most part, and you created a health bar that's inside of the UI, and somehow or another you make it so that I can take damage, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, my recommendation to you is when the player connects with, I'm going to make it very generic, the wording, when the player connects with the with any robot, any enemy, then the health bar indicator shows that they've taken damage. That's what I'm going to say. So if you do that, and I'll post the lab report later on, you should be able to complete your lab for Friday. Okay? Any questions before we go? Long video, lots of learnings and great times for me. Thank you so much for people who helped me out. Edgar, Tatiana, who was here earlier, and other people that are here making recommendations. Thank you so much. Any questions before we go for the day? And the other question I have, of course, is, did you have fun? Because I certainly did. It's always great to do stuff that's new and try different things out and when things change. So if you're good, thank you so much. I'll stop recording now, and I'll stick around for any questions you might have. Otherwise, thank you so much, guys.